Video games and realism. Whenever I hear a game being advertised as realistic, I get a little skeptical. Realism can mean various positive and negative things. It can mean that our character will die much quicker, but that in turn can make the game more thrilling. It can mean that we will be spotted much quicker than we expect, but it could also mean that we have more options when it comes to not getting spotted. Our decisions could have more consequences that will fill us with regret the entire rest of the game, but it can also make us feel much more involved in an incredibly immersive world. Various games have attempted to add realism to its mechanics and have come up with different results. Splinter Cell Chaos Theory's realistic sound and sight mechanics made it one of the most immersive and thrilling stealth games of all time. But the Call of Duty series is often incredibly repetitive because while dying to a realistic amount of bullets can make things thrilling, it also means that the majority of firefights boils down to taking cover, shooting at enemies whenever you get the chance, moving to a new piece of cover, and repeating. I have always looked at the act of playing video games as an adventure into a fantasy land, and because of that, I've always found myself leaning towards more fantastical games, such as the Sly series, Kingdom Hearts, and even Half-Life. But I do occasionally find myself craving a more realistic feel. And that craving has caused me to set my sights on Sniper Elite Berlin, a game that prides itself in being a supposed realistic war shooter where you play as a World War II sniper inserted into the Battle of Berlin in 1945. This game really tries to go all out on being a realistic stealth shooter by making the gun physics realistic, the damage realistic, and even the movement more realistic. But do these realistic aspects make the game better, or sabotage a potentially good stealth game idea? Well, I've played through the game, and hopefully I will be able to answer that question. Let's begin.
Every shot will count.
As always, let's start with the story. You are Karl Fairburn, a German-born American sniper sent into Berlin to prevent the Soviet Union from getting a hold of nuclear secrets. How you go about doing this? Well, I'm not really sure. You're inserted into Berlin to do a number of tasks, and they all seem incredibly unconnected. Whenever you complete a mission, the story doesn't really inform you as to how the task you completed pushed you towards your final objective. What I am saying is that Sniper Elite has no sense of pacing. You have no idea whatsoever on how close you are to the endgame, because all of the tasks you are given have the same sense of importance as the next one. And it doesn't help that the main character shows zero personality, at least until the final hour of the game, but at that point, it's too late. There are a couple interesting references to history, however. First of all, there's the fact that you receive help from the German resistance, which consisted of small groups of people that were against Hitler's regime. There's also the fact that for the most part, you are fighting against NKVD forces instead of the Nazis. And the NKVD was the law enforcement agency of the Soviet Union that directly executed the rule of power of the All-Union Communist Party, until the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. But probably the most significant historical reference occurs in the mission Assassinate Bormann. As the mission name implies, you have to assassinate a man named Bormann. And Michael Bormann was an incredibly prominent officer in Nazi Germany, who died of mysterious circumstances. Your mission to assassinate him sort of serves as a fictional explanation as to his mysterious death. And as interesting as that is, it doesn't really make the overall story better. Nothing of historical significance happens anywhere else in the story, as the majority of the plot is fictional and uninteresting. And it's a real shame too, because I think a story like this has potential. The main character's backstory is kind of interesting, but he doesn't have any sort of emotional reaction to seeing his hometown of Berlin in shambles. Plus, this story could have been at least historically engaging, if the writers were willing to put more references in there, but all we have is the Assassinate Bormann mission. So if we are not playing this game for its story, then we have to rely on its gameplay alone to engage us. How well does it engage us? Well, first, let's talk about level structure. This game's levels are laid out in a mission-by-mission structure. There are a total of 8 missions in the game, each with either one or several interconnecting areas, in which you are tasked to complete several objectives. These objectives can just be moving from point A to point B, escort missions, clearing out bases of enemies, defending objectives, and many more. Your objectives are usually made clear at the start of an area, but they can sometimes unexpectedly change due to the introduction of new circumstances, and the player will have to complete those objectives in addition to the main objectives. At the end of each mission, you will get a score based on how well you completed the level, based on a number of criteria. Now, this is where one of the game's 2 biggest problems stem from. You see, while you do get a score at the end of the mission, you are not given a rank to go with it. And because of that, I have no way of telling how good I did. I mean, I could just assume that I did well, but without the proper ranking system, I have no motivation to play the game the way the developers intended, as there is nothing to reinforce any sort of playstyle. They even have the score be affected by whether or not you saved too many times on a map, but I save as much as I want because again, there is no rank to reinforce that I should do otherwise. This is one of 2 major problems that plague the entire experience. Now let's talk about the controls. This game controls a little differently than other first/third-person shooters for the purpose of being more realistic. For example, rather than always aiming your gun from the hip, Sniper Elite makes it so that you have to raise your gun first to fire it, and the only gun that allows you to look down at sights is the sniper rifle. The accuracy of your shots also have several factors affecting it. The bullets will drop depending on how far away you are, and the gun naturally sways unless you hold your breath. But you can't hold your breath if your heart is beating too fast. And I think that's caused by running around too fast, but I'm not entirely sure. When your character runs around, you really feel a sense of momentum when he moves, as his weight makes it so that he can't change direction instantly, like in other games. Switching between weapons is also pretty slow, and the animation changes depending on what positions your character is in. With all of this, they really succeeded in making your character control realistically. Even though I do occasionally have some trouble moving through doorways or walking upstairs, the control feels right for a realistic stealth game. Many of the levels also have this realistic feel to them, as many of them have a lot of detail put into the environments. There are always soldiers patrolling around the areas. Most of the levels have explosions going off that can mask your sniper fire, and many of these explosions can happen within the map, even occurring right in front of you, if you're unlucky enough. Many of the buildings look war-torn, and a lot of small details are put into the environment, like this computer-like machine in this building, the machinery in the factory level, or planes flying overhead. Also, enemy AI reacts pretty realistically to being shot. When they are critically wounded but still alive, they will writhe in pain, and other nearby soldiers will try and help them while they are in this state. But these games' environments shine the most when it is raining. The rain will leave small puddles on the ground, and the reflection of those puddles look really good. And whenever you look up into the sky with either the binoculars or the sniper scope, you can actually see the rain hit the front of the lens, which is a really impressive detail. All of these environmental characteristics combined with the controls culminates into making you really feel like you are a soldier in a war zone, and that's really good. But how well does the game play out with these controls in these environments? At the beginning of each area, you start out with a sniper rifle, a pistol, and some equipment, and you are given an objective. For the most part, that objective will require that you sneak from point A to point B, with the occasional variation such as defending a location or escorting a wounded soldier. In order to successfully navigate an area, you will have to keep an eye on your camo meter in order to get an idea as to how far the enemy can see you from, and to move accordingly. Now, occasionally, you will have to take out the soldiers patrolling the area. In order to successfully do so, you could either get close enough to take them out with the silenced pistol, or, for the most part, you can use your sniper rifle. In order to take someone out properly, you have to aim your sniper rifle, take into account the distance you're firing at in order to accommodate for distance drop, and fire whenever the background noise is slightly louder than normal. But sometimes, just taking out enemies is not a wise idea. Many areas are guarded by groups of enemies, and you have to choose your actions carefully. You could throw a grenade at them and risk alerting nearby patrols. You could try and carefully take them out, one by one, making sure nobody notices their buddy's corpse. You could throw rocks to draw them out one by one to take them out. Or you could just say f*** it and start a firefight with them, even though that will likely grab the attention of all the patrols and snipers in the area. Speaking of firefighting, let's talk about what happens when you alert the enemies. Firefighting in this game is a risky business, but it's occasionally kind of fun. In order to avoid getting shot up immediately, you either have to have good reflexes with a close quarters gun, or for the most part, you will have to maintain your distance behind cover and fire whenever the enemy pops up. Carl Fairburn has limited health and few health kits, so expending a lot of health trying to take out enemies quickly is not a good idea, as it can lead to you getting gunned down or picked off by a sniper. Also, if you're defending an area during a firefight, you will have to take a couple extra steps in defending yourself, including laying down trip mines and making sure you have enough ammo. I have mentioned that there were snipers earlier, so let's talk about dealing with them. Snipers are located in almost every open area in the game, with the exception of indoor areas and a couple outdoor areas. Their job as a game mechanic is to encourage the player to keep a constant eye on their surroundings, so that a potentially hidden sniper doesn't spot them, shoot at them, and alert their position to the nearby patrols. However, I found several problems with this. Throughout the playthrough, I have never spotted a sniper once before they spotted me, for several reasons. First of all, many of the snipers are hidden incredibly well behind cover, and because of that, you have to really thoroughly search an area in order to find them, and doing that for every single new building that comes into your sight is incredibly tedious to the point where I'm not willing to do so. Second of all, I found that these snipers can be found in some really absurd locations. The most absurd location occurred in this level, where the sniper was found in a completely inaccessible portion of the map. And third of all, whenever a sniper begins to fire at you, they pretty much know where you are at all times, even if you break line of sight. So now I'm forced into a firefight with a sniper, which can become incredibly frustrating, because you have to constantly bait the sniper to come out of cover while risking getting shot in order to get a better shot at him. Plus, the constant firing of guns will attract other patrolling soldiers, which can turn any mission into a huge drawn-out firefight. I didn't mind this the first time I fought with a sniper because I thought getting caught was entirely on me, but when I considered how absurdly they can be hidden and how they never lost sight of me no matter what I did, I began to rightfully blame the game for my numerous frustrations. And I'm not sure if this could be fixed in any way, as I'd rather the snipers not exist at all, so as to allow me to focus the entirety of my attention to the ground. However, the enemy AI on the ground has its own issues. At first, the enemies seemed really intelligent. They could see me from afar, and they kept their distance from my guns during a firefight, and if they were close enough, they would rush at me and try to kill me with sprays of gunfire. But like I said before, whenever a sniper sees you, they seem to be locked onto your position, even if you break line of sight, and this seems to apply to the regular enemies to a certain degree. There were several levels where the enemy was still able to locate me even when I broke line of sight and hid for a while. And in addition to that, there were many instances where many of the enemies seemed to be waiting for me at the objectives I needed to get to. Like they positioned themselves there not because they needed to guard that area, but to prepare for my arrival. It's kind of hard to describe. This frustrated me to no end, because not only were the snipers psychic, but when the regular enemies join in on this, it can create one of the most frustrating experiences you can ever have in the game. It made no sense that this was happening to me. The fact that I had to be extra cautious to the psychic enemy AI slowed things down immensely, and it just frustrated me to the point where I just wanted to rage quit. But I couldn't, because I needed footage to make this review. Some more problems with this game are the immersion-breaking oddities and glitches. First of all, invisible wall placement. I have already talked about how the environment succeeds at making you feel like you're in a war zone by the use of sound and environment details. However, the immersion is hurt a little by the placement of this game's invisible walls. Something that would happen to me quite frequently was that there would be an objective on the map, and I wanted to take the long way around to the objective. I head towards the road that would lead me around the center area, and I would be stopped by an invisible wall. Whenever this happened, I felt disappointed because I was actively being denied an alternate method to completing my objective. I came across the worst example of this during the fortress infiltration mission, where I thought I could exit the fortress on the opposite end from where I entered in order to sneak around a guard. The area looked a whole lot like an area I could explore, but as soon as I tried to move forward, I was stopped right at the train tracks. This area looks so much like an area that I can move around in, but I'm denied yet another method to completing my objective. And this level in general is already pretty immersion breaking, with invisible walls preventing me from hiding in a very specific set of bushes. Second of all in this series of problems are the oddities with objective completion. There were a few cases in the game where I would do something, and it would either cause an objective to change suddenly, or an objective would be completed in a weird way. In one case, during an assassination mission, after I completed the first objective, which was to take out a bunch of soldiers, I was given the objective to stay out of sight until the target arrived. I waited a while, but the truck didn't come for a long time. After I decided to blow up a truck because of a holographic TNT indicator, I got a new objective to kill some random officer on the map. So I did that, and after that, it finally triggered my target arriving in a truck, and I was finally able to complete the mission. In another instance, my mission was to plant TNT by the train, but then I alerted a bunch of guards and the objective changed to prevent the train from leaving at all costs. I planted the TNT anyway, and the game told me that the objective was complete. Then it told me to go to the rooftop, and objective complete. I shot the TNT that I planted, and nothing. Then, after wandering around the area, completely lost on what I was supposed to do, I shot a random straggler, and it said mission complete. I have no idea why that completed the mission, but I guess that one guard's soul was directly connected to the trains, and by killing him, I killed the train? Yeah, I really have no rational explanation for why that was the case, but these oddities with the objectives occurred a few times throughout my playthrough. And while they weren't super frustrating, they were kind of annoying with the way they further slowed my progress. Lastly, this game has a bit of a problem with a certain glitch that occurs. Sometimes I will save my game right before I attempt an area, and then I will die in that area. Then when I reload that save, most of the enemies on the map will be alerted to my exact location. I have no idea what causes this to happen, and the only way to fix it is to reload a save from much earlier, and hope it doesn't happen again. This happened to me an absurd amount of times throughout the playthrough, and since it caused the enemies to be alerted to me, that increases the chance of me having to deal with all the problems I mentioned earlier about their AI. This problem is just stacking the frustration on top of all the other problems I have. But when I started this review, I mentioned that there were two major problems, with one of them being the lack of a proper ranking system to reinforce player behavior. The second major problem is not any of the problems involved with snipers, enemy AI, or glitches. It's a problem because, like the ranking system problem, it should be essential. The second major problem makes itself apparent immediately at the start of the game in the form of the game's tutorial. The tutorial is just a cutscene that does not go over any of the controls or any of the specific mechanics to any detailed degree. All it really teaches you is to move from cover to cover and to be cautious in order to avoid being seen. And considering that's usually a given in stealth games, this cutscene may as well be completely worthless. During the first couple of missions, many text prompts abruptly appear to try and teach you about the game's mechanic at the last minute. These text prompts are incredibly annoying because they tend to appear at the least opportune times. And in order to exit out of them, you can't just hit the enter or escape button, no! You have to move the mouse pointer to the bottom right every single time, making these text tutorials more annoying than they have to be. I eventually just turned them off altogether, but because of that, I ended up finding out about different things in the game way too late. I did not find out that I could use the rocks in Fairbairn's inventory to effectively distract guards until I was a third through the game. I did not find out about the inventory itself until the end of the first level, when I desperately needed to use a medkit, and, well, I could go on and on about how many things I discovered late in the game because of the lack of a proper tutorial, but the point is that you need a proper tutorial if you're going to make a game with tons of different mechanics, and just a lot of stuff going on in general. You need to create a proper tutorial so that the player can experience these things the way that is intended. If you don't, you risk the player becoming incredibly lost. The culmination of all of these problems leads to these moments throughout my playthrough where I would lose it and start running around shooting up everyone with whatever weapons I could find while trying to complete my objectives as fast as possible just so I can finish whatever recording I started that day. I do not like this game and I'd rather not play it again. And I definitely do not recommend it. But the thing is, I really think the developers really tried to make a good realistic stealth shooter. As I stated before, the realistic elements put into the controls and the details put into the environments really do make you feel like you're in a war zone. Also, there were at least 2 levels in the game where I actually had fun. One was the subway level, where the stealth was incredibly close quarters like, and I had to rely on the silenced pistol due to the lack of background noise. I was cautious of the enemy post and patrol patterns, and I was able to stealth the entire level. And towards the end of the level, I had to sneak by one of the enemy hospitals, which was a really nice level detail. The second time where the game shined was in the final level, where I had to sneak through an airport which, like the subway level, was a close quarters stealth level, where I had to rely solely on the silenced pistol. Well, for the most part at least. That is until the end, where I had to rush to a plane before it took off in a pretty thrilling sequence, especially when you consider the realistic elements of the game. And when I saw the ending cutscene followed by the credits, well, I felt unsatisfied due to this being a bad game, but I also felt hope that this idea could be fully realized. And it may have already been realized, as this game produced 2 follow-ups. Sniper Elite V2, which is a remake of this game, and Sniper Elite 3, which is a direct sequel. Now, I have no idea if these games fix the problems of this game, but I'm definitely curious to a point where I'd like to try them. Who knows, maybe I'll find a way to talk about them in the future. That's all I have to say, and thank you for watching.